Hi everyone, welcome to this interview by COREcruitment. Thanks very much for joining us today. My name is Krishnan Doyle. I'm the founder at COREcruitment, and we cover mid to senior level recruitment globally for the areas that we look after. I know we've been running this interview series, meeting lots of different entrepreneurs, business founders and leaders, and just people who are doing interesting things in the sectors that we operate across. And all of the content can be seen on our website, www.corerecruitment.com, on Spotify, on YouTube, and various other channels. So if you want to log in and have a look, then please do so. And if you can recommend an interesting speaker who's doing some great things in your sector at the moment, then please do get in touch, because we're always interested in speaking to interested people. I'll say the word interesting a few more times. Now, we're really lucky to be joined by Paul Evans, who is the CEO from Carlisle Group, and they are doing massively interesting things in the facilities management and security sector at the moment. How are you, Paul?
I'm great. Looking forward to the next 25 minutes. Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Normally see you industry events, fishing around, picking up lots of awards, like Best Company of the Year, as you did last year, Paul, right?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate. We currently hold the Security Officer of the Year award and the Female Security Officer award. So yeah, it's a bit like the Oscars really in terms of picking up those awards back to back. So yeah, quite unique really to pick all three up in 1 year.
Excellent. Now, there's a story about you, Paul, which I don't think a lot of people know, which is that you started off in the facilities management sector as a security officer in Sheffield, locking and unlocking buildings, and you now are the CEO of an 8,000 person strong business. Was this on the career plan? How did all this kind of come around?
No, the career plan originally started in running supermarkets, came out of school, pushed a few trolleys, ended up stacking a few shelves, went into supermarkets for a short period of time. Then at a year and a half in your industry, I was a recruitment consultant for a number of years with a business called Austin Ben, and then fell into this industry, literally fell into it. And I think actually a lot of people in facilities do end up sort of proverbially saying they fell into the industry. And yeah, driving around in a beat car, thinking I was, I don't know, some sort of a secondary police officer, shooting around, locking buildings up, responding to alarms, and probably also trying to chase a goal of satisfying my dad, who was a police officer, in terms of trying to obviously follow his footsteps in a different way. But it has been, yeah, I mean, the 26 years of being in this sector have been absolutely amazing. And I genuinely think facilities management and whatever you're in, whether it's be security, cleaning, FM or whatever, I think it's an amazing world, because it's certainly, you get to see so many different environments, so many different challenges, so many different things. And yeah, people who want a career in it, you'd never see it as a logical career in a careers open day, which is bizarre really, when you think that the percentage of the UK population who work in the facilities management industry, it's significant.
Oh my God, completely. I always think that it's kind of like the biggest companies that nobody's ever heard of, but then when you know them, you start seeing the names kind of like absolutely everywhere. It's really bizarre. Now, when you joined Carlisle in 2015, revenues had fallen from 80 million to 30 million. Can you tell us a little bit about the first few weeks of the turnaround and what you were doing to get everything kind of back on track again?
Yeah, well, I'd stepped out of the sector for a bit. I'd have gone back into recruitment, actually. I said there might be a join of different circles in terms of my career's crossed over a couple of times, but I'd gone into work as commercial director, running a large national accounts team and also business development team for a business called Blue Arrow, which were a large industrial recruitment business. You may also remember that around about 11 years ago, we had a Christmas period when we couldn't get enough HGV drivers. And yes, we were going to fail Christmas. And so my image of coming into Carlisle is on November the 12th of a certain year. So we're getting into peak period. We've got no HGV drivers. We've got to get all the warehouses all correctly stocked and everything. And there's a knock on my door saying, will you go into Carlisle? Now, Carlisle was part of the same group. And there was an opportunity to go into Carlisle. And you're right, it had a meteoric decline really from 80 million to 30 million. And I don't know, at times, and I now you can say that it was a perfect plan and it was a perfect decision, but at the time people who were in my peer group thought I was mad. They thought I've gone from being on a senior leadership team of a 400 million pound business to being a managing director of a business that genuinely was just hemorrhaging. It was just going backwards. And there was a whole raft of things. I won't necessarily go down too much as to what that first few weeks were like, but there was a genuine, real sort of, right, you've got to get in and grip it. You've really got to get under the skin of it and really understand. But what it did have it had some amazing customers, and it only had 37 customers at that point. So they were all of a decent size customer base. And I suppose that's what I looked at and went, there was something that you could be done with it, that you could turn it around. But the other thing that we had at that time, it was around the time when Carlisle was on the brink. We had issues in other areas. We were treating people as commodities, in my opinion. We'd come out of the bubble that was 2008, 2010. We'd gone down a bit of a cost of living challenge already previously when the last economic challenge was there. And I think we were starting to see the green shoots in 2015, where ESG was coming on the agenda, CSR was coming on the agenda, and people wanted to look after people again. And I think that just played perfectly to my personal view. And I'm sure sometimes my senior team will say, "Where is he?" And they'll say he's on a platform, or he's somewhere else, or he's seeing a security officer in a supermarket. And I think that's been the strategy of the business, really, is to have complete a real drive from senior leadership down, to be visible, to be ethical, to actually reward and recognise all the amazing people that do amazing things on the front line every day.
Excellent. Love that. Now, is it that kind of like, I mean, because you've got some really good statistics about kind of like the business in terms of like your proportion of salaried roles that get filled internally, which I think is like 58%, which for the sector is really high. And also kind of like the internal progression stuff that you do, and just like, all of that kind of cultural stuff that kind of comes in. Like, can you just give us a little bit about how you kind of like do that in the business, and how that kind of like really builds engagement within your team?
Yeah, there's a lot of books on this, actually. It's quite funny doing a leadership podcast to a certain degree, because there's a lot of books about whether this is a good or a bad thing. People will sit on it in terms of call everybody a family member. And we went down this period quite early on of saying that it's a family. Now, one thing I would say genuinely, and I say this all the time, is don't believe that it's all rosy. We have exactly what a family has. We have arguments, we have fallouts, we have divorces, we have all the greatness and the badness that a family would have. But there's a sense of that in terms of helping people along that journey. So one of our 4 values is basically in terms of allowing anybody to be invested in to become a sector-based expert. And that goes all the way from we're paying for people to do degree apprenticeships all the way up to level 7, all the way down to in terms of level 1, level 2. We also, and I said this is a funny story I tell, is we've paid for people to do cookery courses in the past. Now, we're not a catering business, and security officers and cleaners would probably think, well, what on earth's in it for me doing a cooking course? But people asked, would I pay for them to be in terms of going on a cooking course? And I think it's just that level of professional and personal development, and we underlie that. And then, yeah, we've been fortunate that the HR team and the recruitment team have done amazing things to get to that level where 60% of all the internal jobs at a supervisory and management level above are all filled by people coming through. And we've got real sort of longevity of management team. Now, equally though, and going back to the world of recruitment, and as you will know, because you've helped us in terms over the years, is you do need new talent to come in. You do need somebody to come in with a bit of fresh ideas. So I think what's helped in Carlisle is that journey now from 30 million up to 190 million. So we've had that significant growth that has also allowed us to bring new talent in. And we've got some amazing people across all areas, whether they're in support functions, on the front line, or senior leadership team in terms of that are driving and really in terms of bringing everything together.
Excellent. Now, you assist the UK government through being chair of the S12 Security Gardening Leadership Group, and this is all about professionalisation within the sector, best practice, that kind of side of things. Can you just give us a little bit about that, and kind of like how your contribution there kind of actually filters out to the rest of the sector?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose I've got an underlying strapline to leave the industry in a better place than I find it. So I'm on a bit of a crusade. I'll say it is a crusade, and it probably has always been there for the last 25 years, is always trying to do things better and trying to obviously get a better pay rate. We are very much aligned to a lot of other strategies in Carlisle. But I suppose what I went is that obviously a rising tide raises all boats strategy, really, that if we can get everybody to improve and we can get the opportunity to improve our standards and our opportunity, then everybody wins. Security officers get better paid, cleaners get better wages, and all them sort of things. But the S12 is specifically working with the UK Security Minister and the Home Office team around in terms of looking at what are the improvements that are needed to the UK security landscape. Now, we've also had in that period a new piece of legislation that's coming in, which is Martin's Law, which is counter-terrorism legislation that's impacting. So we've got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, really, to make some key changes to how we can see security with one underlying purpose, which is to raise public protection, working with government, policing colleagues, other stakeholders to absolutely raise the bar. I mean, there's certain things in the security industry that will blow your mind if you're not in it every day, but there's no mandatory business licensing. So you can go home tonight and set up a security company up in your bedroom, and yet tomorrow you can be out and about selling your wares on the high street or to any organisation. So we want to close that bit of loophole in terms of trying to make it a bit more professionalised. But also there's a whole raft of, in terms of things we're doing around buyers engagement, trying to get buyers to understand the value of a security officer, and then equally trying to look in terms of the accreditations and the compliance side of the industry to make sure that we're trusted, because there are now over 470,000 security officers in the UK. If you put that in context, there are only 160,000 police officers in the UK. So roughly in terms of 470,000.
Crazy.
Yeah. And that's just the licensed population. There's a bit of legislation going through at the moment, which we're waiting on government to come back with the outcome of the public consultation, which would also require all in-house security officers to become licensed. So that number could well pass over 550,000, 600,000, and therefore that ratio of police to security could get way up to sort of closer to 5 to 1 as you move over the next few years. And the security industry has significantly gone from a turnover, as I said, 20 years ago, because that number, when you said 470,000, 20 years ago, when the Private Security Industry Act came in, there was only 230,000 security officers. So policing numbers have remained exactly constant, but private security has seen a significant jump, and now the industry is worth 9.2 billion compared to what it was 20 years ago, around about 3.6 billion. So it's been a massive area of investment, and whether that's good, bad or indifferent in terms of you've got your own reasons as to why people are paying more for security, but it is definitely been an interesting area, and probably security officers now are performing more roles that typically would have been, if you think back probably 20, 30 years ago, security officer, you might have imagined a gatehouse with a guy opening a barrier or closing a barrier. Now it is really, really in terms of value adding, and they've done a research on this that 9 out of 10 incidents that now happen in the public realm are more likely to be responded to first by a security officer than they are by a police officer. And I think that's probably because policing rightly is focused on different areas. But if you think that police and security, you're more likely to see a security officer on a high street than you are a police officer.
Wow. So in terms of the biggest structural changes that you see facing the outsourced sector at the moment, I mean, what's keeping you up at night? And I'm just relating this back to kind of like, those numbers are absolutely huge, right? So like, what do you think is coming down the line?
I think positively, hopefully there is some, the changes that we're trying to work with the UK government will be positive, but as you will know, and your listeners will know, that anything to do with legislative change take years. Like you sometimes think in business you can get things done quickly. So I think there is some good news coming down the line that will be positive for us. I see a reduction. There are purported to be, and these numbers blow your minds as well, there are purported to be over 10,000 different security companies in the UK. Just last year, and this only came out this week, so this is hot off the press, just last year the HMRC announced that according to the manned guarding SIC code, there were newly registered 3,200 security companies created last year. So the biggest challenge is the probably basic economics of oversupply, which is driving down in terms of pay rates and driving down in terms of therefore investment. And I hope that we see a movement towards a professionalised approach. You've got equally other things that all of your listeners, in whatever arm of facilities they're in, you've got obviously movements against coming in with the Employment Rights Act that's coming in. You've got exact changes around automation and AI, which is starting to have positive in terms of it, facial recognition, analytical CCTV, data reporting, That bit is definitely. So I'm sort of. I don't know if you asked that question thinking I was going to be the doom master here. I was going to talk about a lot of doom. For me personally, I see we've had a challenging period probably around in terms of how we came out of COVID and this oversupply. But I genuinely see, and I suppose the work that we're doing in the S12 and trying to lead that change, I genuinely see that in a couple of years' time, this industry will start in terms of see significant outcomes that are going to benefit us over the long term with that underlying position to raise public protection. I mean, one of the things that I can already say is that in the UK transport or the rail sector specifically, we're going to have a national security uniform. No matter who they work for, we will all wear the same uniform. I mean, because why does a passenger need to see somebody in an orange, a blue, a red? It's just confusing. So I think there's a real good things that are going to come at us. And as I said about automation, AI, and all the other things that are coming, I think that then brings in the need, though, when we go back to people, because everything is people at its heart. We need to make it an attractive industry. We need to treat people right, and we need to make sure that they are safe. We've had a significant rise in violence and aggression. We've had a tragic incident in Milton Keynes where a security officer lost his life. Recently, Gary Stanley. And we've got to make sure that we are able to, in terms of deal with those increasing threats that are now facing security officers through the need of the wide role that they're doing.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, with the AI thing, I mean, so many different sectors are talking about kind of like a decrease in terms of their working populations due to AI and tech and sensors and scanners and cameras and all of that kind of side of things. But with that number, 417,000, I'm really stuck on that number now. But also in terms of all of those new companies that were formed last year, it actually looks like the security sector is growing despite of that, right?
Yeah, and I think the security sector, and probably equally, probably the facility sector as a whole, is even if you think during COVID, I mean, both security and cleaning, in terms of had significant demand pressures put on them during COVID. So, and during recession, security also, as you stating the obvious, really, isn't it? But when we're in a recession and cost of living crisis, people purchase more security rather than cut back because of vulnerability and theft and the business risk that is available. I don't see a significant reduction in that number over the next few years. I see potentially adding more value that will allow them to do more different jobs. So it might be a diversion of other areas of business operations that move into security. I think there's definitely, in terms of some of the AI side, I think it's more complementary rather than replacement. I think it's making places better. And I go back to, we talk about Martin's Law. Now, Martin's Law tragically was brought in because of the Manchester Arena bombing. And if you ever go and look at the inquiry and the failings that were obviously identified that led to the tragic incidents. Now, whether that actually was ever really going to stop the incident happening, but there were so many failings around technology, equipment, training, interaction, CCTV, that I think technology is just going to close some of those challenges for us and make it more professional. And I'm on record many times saying that when I'm talking about the security industry, I'm really trying to promote it in its success and all the things that are great about it. But then you still see some real bad things that happen in the security world, and you say, well, how does that actually be allowed to happen? And I think technology, and I mean, one of the things we're talking about is better data and intelligence sharing, so that through technology we can absolutely join up. If you think about an area of, I don't know, let's pick the capital, let's pick London. In a certain area of London, you've probably got, and you talk about the 470,000, in any area, I'll pick the West End of London, on any given day, you might have upwards of sort of 5,000 to 10,000 security officers in a very tight, defined area of London, but they don't operate as a community. Now, we as an industry would think, well, if we have a major incident, wouldn't it be great through technology that this commonality of that message is very quickly transposed and we can deal with it? And that's why I don't specifically think that we'll see a massive curtailing of. We saw it probably about 20 years ago when people brought CCTV and everybody thought, "Oh, CCTV! Don't worry, we don't need the officer watching the back door." I mean, my dad in police and in a police officer sense said, "Crime prevention is nothing without human intervention," and I think that is so true in our industry. I think you still need somebody, and there's been all comical And I will say this, I might be 5 years' time, we might be seeing humanoids running down Oxford Street and chasing shoplifters. And that is reality, though, when you look at some of the things that are happening in where they're getting developed. And Tesla are already on that journey. And who will see, and don't want to take it into modern warfare, but you look at how modern warfare has changed as well in terms of some of the technology in it. But I don't immediately see in the next probably 2 to 3 to 4 or 5 years, see an immediate curtailing of it. I see a complementary that will raise standards and raise public protection.
Excellent. Now, coming back to the people side of things, which seems to be the theme of this interview, which is perfect. You have said that your number one responsibility of your leadership team is about caring for people in all environments in terms of mental health, well-being, that whole kind of side of things. Can you give us a couple of examples of how this cascades through the business? Yeah.
So when we used to do our strategy meetings every year, I used to put up a little clip art picture of a tower block. And I used to turn a tap on, a metaphorical tap, and say, this will only work if the actual person on every floor gets wet. So those drips need to come through. And I think that very much in terms of then drives the ability to be out and about and listening to our colleagues. We have something that is, and it's not always probably deemed to be the most helpful thing, but there is a way that an employee on the front line can get straight to the CEO. And that is a defined route of communication. Now, I hope that always doesn't get used, but it does, I will be honest. There is always people who will want to come straight to the CEO, but very much in terms of what we are geared around, making sure that through visibility, through job chats, and through in terms of presence. And equally, one of the things I would say that in Carlisle that we work massively on is selecting the right customers, because we are more or less out of the 8,000 staff, 8,700 of them, so there's 300 that are in support functions, 8,700 staff are domiciled or based on customers' locations. So customers, and I always look at a customer, when we're starting to choose a customer, we always think, and we ask that question, is over the last 4 or 5 tenders, have they always changed provider? And you start getting a sentiment, don't you, as well, how much are they a part of any problem when they tell you that things aren't going right? And we've been really fortunate that probably over the last 10 years of our journey, we've found some amazing brands and some amazing customers, but we found the ones that really want to actually support paying the real living wage, looking after welfare, supporting the actual tools and conditions that are invested into actually allow them to do their jobs. And I think that therefore means that we come at it with a partnership approach. But those frontline employees will every time have an opportunity to feed back in terms of where we're doing, how we're getting on, and ultimately have that direct linking right all the way up to the CEO.
Love that. Now, in terms of, you just mentioned obviously that I think it was 8,700 of your employees are based at client kind of sites. In terms of supporting those people who are frontline, often doing night shifts, often working on their own, often isolated, how do you support them? And so lots of companies put out policies which are just on notice boards, but I think you guys go a bit beyond that, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing is, out of the turnover, the 190 million, we only have 85 customers. And that's by design as well. You look at some business and we're not trying to do everything on the high street to a certain degree. Most of our customers are in large, whether they be hospitals, transport networks, stadia, local authority. So I think that really then means that we're able to implement contract management strategies. So all of the contracts will have designated and dedicated contract management and supervision built into them. I think I'd come from a world previously where we ended up overloading contract managers with too much work. And then you just saw that then it genuinely became like a game of waiting for that. You sat there with a fire extinguisher waiting for which one to go off each morning. So it's trying to get ahead of the proactive conversations to say, well, and also putting tools in terms of that when the business may, obviously, in terms of being the silent hours, the actual people who are working during those silent hours do not feel isolated. So they've got a way still to be able to obviously log on. They've got a way to speak to somebody. We have a 24-hour control room that effectively allows them to be communicated with. But also, at the start and end of their shift, they've got some way of making sure that they're able to hand over and to feed into management.
Love that. Now, coming to kind of like final two questions, which is very much about your kind of like your own personal kind of like career journey. But in terms of like somebody who's kind of like had a big impact on your career, as a recruiter, I always think that somebody has a position that they go into and it changes their trajectory in terms of where they're going to go to next. Was there a person who kind of influenced you, or a job role that you were in that really changed your approach?
Well, there's one person who, and I say this to a lot of people, they probably may not listen to it. He did listen to other podcasts over my time. My dad's probably the biggest influence, and a lot of people will say that. And there's a one-line strap line that is good and is bad. And by the way, I'm going to give you the both sides of that. My dad's when I was growing up, he would always say to me, I think he just wanted me to get to work and not be lazy, but he would always say to me, "Graft, Yorkshireman, graft covers up so many sins, Paul." And obviously, by that meaning hard work. If you work hard, you'll get more opportunities. I mean, it's a very statement of the obvious to a certain degree. That has probably been the underlying thing in all of my ambitions and probably driving to where we've got to today, is that I do sort of go that extra mile. The negative of that is this consequence of sacrificing work life, family life, and all that sort of stuff. But I think it would be him if I was going to say, I mean, we've done a lot of work as well around the purpose of a business. So in terms of Simon Sinek, we did a lot of work around that sort of side, start with why. But I think you have to put the two together. You can have all the great philosophy and methodology, but you still do need people to get on and do the job and be energetic, motivated, ambitious. And I think I've been fortunate that, and like I said, some days when I'm getting in at sort of a stupid o'clock, having been to either a football game or been on a train station, I do sometimes think, Dad, why did you say that? That would have been so much easier if you'd have called me something else.
So in terms of advice that you would give to somebody starting off their career in the facilities management sector or the security sector, what advice you would go back and give to your kind of younger self, and what would you say?
Right. And this you may think is counterintuitive to everything I've talked about in terms of Carlisle, but I say this to everybody who's in a journey with Carlisle. Go and get as much experience as you can, and you'll be rubbing your hands here in terms of a recruitment point of view. I genuinely, we've had good people leave us, come on, knock on my door, because it's a pyramid. Any business is a pyramid organisation. If you constantly pushing people up, you're going to hit a pyramid. In my earlier part, and I would say this to any, I've done a lot of graduate in terms of seminars and briefings about what work life will be. I genuinely say go and learn very quickly. In your 20s, go and try and get as much experience as you can. Now, that's interesting, the generational change where we are now on that poll in terms of what the new generations want. But that would be my one advice. And I would also, again, a phrase that is used, fail fast, fail often. Because I made some, and I said to my management team, and I don't say it too loudly, but I made some horrendous mistakes in my 20s. And yeah, missing zeros off 100,000 numbers and stuff like that, and then having to go back and think, how am I going to deal with this, and right sizing it? Yeah, and also in terms of so that's one thing, which is, and you might say, but I also am very fortunate, and we just sat in head office today. There's been an interview with somebody else who's gone away for a bit and has now knocked our door and said, "Can I come back?" And that happens so many times. If you treat people right, they will want to come back to your environment.
Absolutely. And final question, I can't imagine you don't have a plan for where you want the business to be in the next 3 to 5 years. So if we're sitting down and doing this interview again, kind of like, then, like, how many numbers would you be talking about? Any sectors you would want to be going into? Where will the business be?
So I think people commonly will sort of think of Carlisle in, whether it be security or whether it be cleaning. We are so much now more in terms of the diverse range of services that we deploy. I mean, we've just fitted out all public conveniences, and that's obviously all the way from plumbing, electrical, all the way to flooring and lighting. So we've done a whole range in terms of refurbs projects that we've done. We are very keen to become more of a rounded facilities business. And I think that will probably lead into trying to either continue to organically grow. We've not done, to this point of going from 30 million to 190 million, we didn't do any acquisitions until last year. Last year, we brought in 3 businesses from elsewhere in the portfolio. They came into Carlisle, so they are part of our group structure now. But that has given us a bit of a launch pad to go and buy into, and I would suggest we're looking to buy into a hard FM business, and also in terms of to buy into the security systems marketplace, which would electronic systems complement the people. An ambition really to continue the journey. But one thing that absolutely, just a caveat that I say to everybody whoever we talk about this, not to lose the DNA though. We do not lose the DNA of the business. And that is hard. As you get bigger, it becomes harder in terms of that tower block becomes more floors in it, and that water has to run further down. But so that's the challenge for me really. How do we continue the great story but not lose the DNA?
Absolutely. Paul, thank you so much for having a chat. Congratulations on where the business is to date. I have no doubt that we're going to do one of these interviews again in 3 years' time, and it's going to be 20,000 people and 110 customers and all of that kind of side of things. But congratulations on everything so far, and thank you so much for sharing your story.
No, thanks for having me.